Welcome to another No Direct Flight Nairobi conversation. Today I'm joined by Dr. Njoki Ngumi to speak about This One Went to Market, episode 5 of the Nest Collective's We Need Prayers, a mini-series dedicated to the city of Nairobi, released in 2018, and the mini-series as a whole. Dr. Njoki Ngumi is an artist, writer, and feminist thinker who has held positions in private and public healthcare sectors in Kenya. As a NESS founding member, she has been co-writer, screenwriter, and script supervisor for several of the NESS film works, and is currently expanding her filmmaking practice as co-director of The Feminine and The Foreign. Her keen eyes and ears are a critical component of the collective's post-production process, as well as its strategic and research outputs. In addition, she coordinates the NESC external collaborative projects and serves as programs and strategy lead at sister company, Hiva. Welcome, Njoki. It's so nice to have
Thank
you.
you. Asante sana.
So maybe before we start, I think I should let the audience know is that I am a huge fan of the NESC from the days of, what was that? Music thing, the one that had Silas Miami and
Legacy.
Yes, I still have Legacy. Like I downloaded it years ago, and like with every new computer or whatever, I'm just like, this is the one thing I'm going to carry from
Oh my
place
gosh,
to place.
that is the most wonderful thing to say. Thank you.
Yeah, but I also really loved We Need Prayers. Like I remember when I was watching This One Went to Market for this conversation, I was like, it's nice watching it again, especially as a person who works in the arts. Like that's something we're going to talk about in this conversation, but it does a lot of work in a very short amount of time, you know? So,
Asante.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, so let's get into it. I'm over here tapping things because that's where my questions come. So I'm a person who's lived in Nairobi for many years. I wasn't born in Nairobi, but you know, those people who are like born and bred. I'm just the bred, not the born. And so many of those stories that were highlighted in the anthology are really familiar. Like it feels like, you know, like a survey of Nairobi. And
Wow.
so I'm really interested in what spurred the decision to make the anthology.
So the anthology was actually step 3 in a process, because steps 1 and 2 were having the first 2 pieces that we made commissioned by different people, which so the first one, which is you know, it's going to look so bad because there's so many We Need Prayers that sometimes I get their names wrong. I
think the first one is We Need Prayers.
So the first one is called This One Stayed at Home, and it was commissioned. It was commissioned by Contemporary, and we were super interested in, because remember we'd just come from making Tukomacho, which was a long narrative which demanded a lot of continuity, of following one person, one story, one point of view, over a period of time. And we wanted a little bit of a break from that, where you don't have to like sit with one person for so long, or one character rather. And we wanted like this idea of multiple points of view, because thinking about Nairobi becomes, like you said, there's infinite Nairobi experiences, and none of them is more valid than the other. I am not a believer in this thing that if you are born in Nairobi, you are more of a Nairobian than people who move to Nairobi and settle in Nairobi, or that you stop being a Nairobian for whatever reason, or you stop having a Nairobi aligned identity if you choose to leave for whatever reason, unless you're the one who puts it down yourself. I feel like identities belong to the people who take them on, and that the community has to deal with everybody having different reasons for wanting to take on different identities. And I think because Nairobi is so, and this is for good and for bad, because Nairobi is so central to the ways in which Kenya is understood. And of course, this has many problems, especially thinking about Nairobi-ness as a relative supremacist identity compared to the rest of Kenya. So Nairobi is the most urban compared to other cities. Nairobi is the definition of urbanness compared to Ocha, where everywhere that's not Nairobi is considered Ocha unless it's another city. Like all of those problematic things that we assume about Nairobi, which are all deeply problematic and that again are rooted in very unequal decisions to develop and redevelop Nairobi at the expense of the rest of the country. So like if you see even like, I asked myself, are we really going to make yet another highway in this city? When and while I like there are reasons that people make these decisions, I really wonder if all of those reasons would stand up to like the value systems reasoning of the multiple marginalizations which have just become more layered and more layered and more layered over the decades since we've had independence. So I mean, minus all of that ridiculous money history lesson. When we come back to the idea of Nairobi, Nairobi is a multiplicity of things. It's an infinity of things to an infinity of people. And so we were really interested in snapshots to be able to even begin to conceptualize this idea of the diversity of city experiences, the diversity of extractions, because we were really interested in like the ways in which Nairobi people make survival decisions, and sometimes those survival decisions are very costly, both to them and to others. And so if you look at These Ones Stayed Home, it's an entire scene that's shot in a bedroom where these people are discussing whether they're going to go and help their neighbors because their neighbors are being robbed, and they decide that they're going to help their neighbors through Facebook, and then hijinks ensue because it's a ridiculous situation. And also the ways in which Kenyans use humor can be very, it's funny, but it's not funny. It's actually leaning very strongly towards the farcical. That's also the same place that we went to with the film that was selected for this and for No Direct Flight, which is This One Went to Market, which is one of our favorite films to make, partly because Patricia Kihora is ridiculous. She's so funny. She's really funny. And she's really a delight. And so the set was just like collapsing with laughter the whole time, because she thought the script was really funny. And so her whole exploration about why the script was funny for us. And then even us, there were multiple decisions that we had made in the making of that script that we were also explaining. And then all of that just became ridiculous for everybody concerned. And so the decisions that the artist is making in This One Went to Market can be familiar decisions for some, are decisions that we're choosing to look at with a critical eye, but again, to kind of lift with humor, as opposed to see them as very dank and dire. They are those things. But then like the minute you introduce the idea of, Cheza Kiwewe, you have to survive the way you survive. Cheza Kiwewe is very much an underlying theme in all of the We Need Prayers, shorts.
Yeah, I'm interested in this, the ideas that animate the anthology, because the thing in This One Went to Market, which is the thing I come back to often, is it's such a hilarious curing of actual discourse. Like, it was one of those times when you're like, my God, I've probably written something like that once, or said something like that, or read a text like that. It's if you're interested in the arts, it's very familiar. And so it acts as a very hilarious critique. And as you're saying, Patricia Kihoro is a consummate comic. Like the whole time, just like the thing that's being done, there is a level of ridiculousness to it, but there's also something about having someone who's a comic do it. And so I'm interested, because you're all filmmakers, what informed this choice of topic? Because it's a bit close to home, so why this?
I mean, I think many things informed that particular choice of topic. I think first, if we like the way I'd explained about We Need Prayers in general as a universe of things, it would be difficult to talk about Nairobi without talking about Nairobi's artists. That's number one. And the multiple ways they have to figure out life, the multiple reasons they have to figure out life. The second thing is we've always thought as the Nest about how the I that is on you can affect you in multiple ways. And like for us, we consider that through many particular lenses. We consider the idea of the male gaze when we imagine being women, being of femme identity. We consider the idea of the heterosexual gaze when we consider queerness, right? And how those kind of, and I'm going to use the word supremacist again, those types of supremacist gazes or privileged gazes affect the person on the other side of that gaze, who is then labeled as other, and the ways in which that gaze seeks, as part of its oppression, to define, and it seeks to, how do I put it? It seeks, because it doesn't understand. And so it's not a gaze that seeks to understand. It's not a gaze that seeks to see. It is a gaze that seeks to kind of put in a box. And you find that the same thing happens with the white gaze on African art very, very much. We saw it with African fashion, especially, and we just come from publishing the book called Not African Enough, in which we're exploring the idea of the changing design aesthetic in Nairobi through multiple different eyes. And you see all of the designers that we present have all been told that their designs don't look African because they're not using Ankara. And can you imagine, like, the sheer ridiculousness of asking 55 countries to all design with Ankara so that you know that they're African? And that's not the way we are set up. Even Ankara itself is a whole political conversation when you consider that the vast amount of Ankara is, you know, like a significant amount of Ankara is actually produced outside the continent, both in Europe and in Asia, and then shipped here for us to consume. So whether or not, yes, they're a little bit responsive to cultural and chronological ideas when it comes to the thematics of the designs that they choose to print, yes, but then also at the same time, is it cloth that we are making ourselves? And you find that, yes, in several West African countries, people are thinking through how can we kind of own the whole Ankara thing. But then beyond Ankara, there's so many other textiles, there's so many other ways of imagining fabric, imagining garments, and so to tie Africans, you know, to particular visual signals of quote unquote Africanness as they are understood in the global north. So Ankara is one of them, Kikoi is one of them, you know, Kitenge is one of them. Actually, it's called Chitenge. So to tie us to all of those and say that anything else is an African, when on the same global north will freely be inspired by multiple non-Western schools of thought as regards aesthetics and design. Like it's wild, it's absolutely wild. And so we're very aware of what sometimes the white gaze can do. And this We Need Prayers was kind of looking at the decisions that so many artists have actually made to both pander to, but subvert the white gaze at the same time, because the white gaze is not necessarily deeply self-aware of the fact that people are making money by making the thing that they think the market wants. So for them, they have this whole idea of what Afrofuturism is. They have this whole idea of like we can define or what the Afrofuturist idea is, or where it's coming from, or who the African is as they're embarking on an Afrofuturist exploration. But then the artist is trying to make a buck. You know, it's truly not that deep for them. So that for us was funny. The other thing is that we worry about Afrofuturism as a way of defining and classifying African artists, because and we've said this in many places. We we're unsure about whether its definitions are able to serve everybody who's thinking through the idea of futures from an African perspective. We also worry that there's no other region in the world that has its own future kind of defined by a prefix. So China futures are not called Sino-futurism, or Chinese artists who are exploring future are not called Sino-futurists. Definitely Europeans just explore the future and call it the future, and Americans, right? If you look at the whole, if anything, their explorations of the future are actually guiding science now, because I'm sure there's somebody somewhere who is currently funded to figure out how exactly would a lightsaber work in real life. Can you actually make a thing like that? And there are multiple ways in which people are figuring out space travel and multiple other, ideas of how we could terraform, how we could live on other planets because of the ideas and depictions and visuals and aesthetics that they've seen in Star Wars, in Star Trek, in multiple other ways of envisioning the future. But those are just called futures. They're not called Euro futures or American futures. Right? But then you come to Africa, where A, it's called Afrofuturism. B, you have to be suspicious of a name that's embraced with such, C, it's not necessarily like a movement with even artistically with leaders and with I think Afrofuturism, especially at the point in time when it started to rise, especially as part of Black and American Black understandings and ways of seeing, is useful to many people for many reasons. We just don't think it should be given the kind of all-encompassing powers that it has been given. And that's another reason why we were so interested in just the instrumentalization of the bare bones of the aesthetic for this one artist who wanted to make money. So you do this thing that to you is actually ridiculous, then you panel beat language around it, and then you present it to the people, and the people are like, yeah, this is so deep. And it's like, so then even you as the audience, you're like, can you go and think about how much art has been presented to you, and you never know where the person is coming from, right? And I think beyond being a critique of Afrofuturism for us, or a reflection on Afrofuturism, it's also a reflection on art speak and the ways in which art speak is used to alienate and to make and to give things depth after the fact, or the appearance of depth, when sometimes a thing is not like 3D. It's really not. It doesn't exist in multiple dimensions. Maybe it's not as cerebral as it's being presented to be. And also people can understand things in multiple ways. Like I can come to a piece and then the piece does X and Y and Z for me and my emotions. And then somebody else comes and it's just, beautiful in a particular way. And somebody else comes and for them, the piece doesn't do anything. And like the beauty of art is also in being able to interpret it in multiple ways. And so we were really interested in this idea that a curator or a critic can, later reframe a thing that somebody did with such silliness and economic intention into like a grand statement about the continent. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what the thought process was.
Yeah, and for me, one of those things was, as you're saying, like, also, is there room for whimsy? Is there room for fun in African art making? Can we just do things? Can we just make things? And
right.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I go back to it often, because I have a friend of mine, Dawn. We have an art podcast called Corpus, and one of the things we talk about a lot, even away from the podcast, is this idea of art world bingo. Like there's some things you need to say, and you just have to say enough of them to get ahead. But the thing is, if you're in that world often enough and you're trying to be reflexive, you will notice those things, so and that really jumps out in this particular episode of the anthology.
I love, and let me just say this really quickly. I love what you said about art world bingo, because that's kind of the root of this one went to market, that there's some things that you kind of tick. And actually, one of our favorite parts of this one went to market is not even just like the film, it's all of the media pieces at the end of the film, and the headlines, and you know, the things that they say. And this artist who 3 seconds ago was being utterly ridiculous is now just kind of transcendent, resplendently, you know, deep. And we're like, but you know, you know, so like there's definitely that element of the thing. I think maybe, and to not necessarily make it all to not necessarily simplify it too much, because again, we have to have both and ways of seeing that. Yes, it can be simple and mercenary, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's also going back to the art world and how it has defined itself as being exclusionary, and how then the language of that one uses to access the art world is part of that exclusion. And so they know that you're one of them when you speak their language, which is just another form of tribalism. We know tribalism as Kenyans, we've seen it before. And so in multiple fields and in multiple sectors, there's all these people who say that you have to be speaking like this. And again, you even find it among feminists, right? That there's ways that you have to speak, there's people that you have to quote in order to be considered a feminist. And I'm like, there's multiple ways to look at that. One is that definitely my life experience alone is not enough to make me to give me a full and robust feminist analysis. I do have to read. I do have to see other people's life experiences. I don't necessarily have to dig into what is considered canon, right? But then there's a reason that canon is canon. And so to enter into that place with a lot of reflection, to then take on the both and, where you look at canon for yourself, you see what is possible for me to access, what isn't. Again, we all come at these things from multiple places, and one of the reasons that everybody has really been pushing back on the idea of reading is that reading has always been presented to us academically. Like, reading is a thing that is like undergraduate, you know, and the books that we are being told to read, all of these tomes of, whether it's in the art world, whether it's for different movement works, whether it's to understand Black studies a little bit better. Some of them can be really, you know, large. But one of the reasons that I love the internet, love the internet, is that you will always be able to find, there's somebody else who has read that book somewhere and has been able to break it down. Of course, you get it through their lens, which means that there's another layer of interpretation, but that sometimes can hold you over until you feel ready to read the larger thing. You may not also necessarily feel like you want to read the whole thing, but then there's all these podcasts where people will like take a chapter and then kind of be able to break it down. So I think ways of knowing are increasing, and ways of disseminating and spreading information are increasing because of the internet. And I think that there's multiple opportunities, again, and of course, considering different levels of access to the internet, and especially that gender plays a huge role in whether people have access to internet-enabled devices or disposable income that can be spent on data, right? But with there's multiple ways for knowledge to spread. There's also discussion such that I'll come and I'll find you talking about a thing that you've read online, and then we have a conversation about it, and I leave with a completely different idea of the thing that I've been reading. So knowledge is an ever-growing thing, right? And back to the idea of language and different modalities of excluding people from a world, and a world needing to set itself apart and to define other people as other, we definitely have to question that, especially as artists. And if we find a place where people are using the name of one artist in order to exclude others, then, and especially excluding others from opportunities, excluding others from X and Y and Z, then those are things that definitely have to be questioned, you know? So definitely, I think the art world has benefited by creating hierarchies and by making people feel like you have to speak this way, you have to talk this way in order to make art buyers or galleries take you seriously. Sometimes the artist will outsource all of that to like an art manager or to the person who's kind of managing your portfolio. That happens as well. And so then that also tells us about different types of and I guess especially when you're moving into more commercial circles, different types of consumers, right? So there are consumers that will not take you seriously unless you're the person who talks like that. So now you have to get somebody who talks like that for you. And then there are others who just want something beautiful because it moved them, and like there's different layers of engagement. And so we can problematize it. It does deserve a much deeper reflection and critique than it's gotten. But then the first question that we have to ask is it serving the artists? Is it serving the people that the art is about? And when you come to African art by African artists, about African people, then the minute particular language starts being used, then you start getting an idea of who is this supposed to serve? Who is this for, really? And that can be critiqued, and the minute things come out into public, then the public get to say what they think about it.
Yeah, it's so strange because I think that's a question that comes along with thinking about gazes, is also which audience is imagined in the making or presenting of this work. Do we speak about work in the same way when we're in Berlin, or as we do when we're in Nairobi, or even when we're on one side of Nairobi and another side of Nairobi, that sort of thing. So there's always that complication. And I think for anyone who's like, who thinks of themselves even mildly as a media scholar, and I use media scholar here very broadly, I don't necessarily mean somebody with a PhD in media studies, but somebody who's taking time to think about the media they're consuming, that's something that will always come up, like when this thing was being made, the person who was imagined on the other end was not me, and you can tell. I think even before you have the language to be able to speak about the gaze or heteronormativity or whatever, you have a sense of, when actually, which is the thing with theory, what theory does, that it gives you language for the thing you already feel or understand.
Exactly.
Now you're like, okay, so what this is X, or Y or Z.
Yes.
Just to shift a little bit, you spoke earlier about the fact that this project was commissioned by Contemporary and one of the things we've been interested during the course of NDF is talking about this commissioning process, and also how filmmakers and creators can tap into it, because it can look very opaque from the outside. And so we'd like to know, the cogs and the wheels that go into that commissioning process.
Yeah. So the thing around commissioning is that and let me explain that from the point of view of We Need Prayers, is that We Need Prayers had two pieces that were commissioned by two different people first, and then after we'd made those two, the idea for the rest of the body of work became a lot more clear. And so then we were able to find resources to make the rest of the 6 pieces that the series is known for. So one of them was commissioned by Contemporary and who had come and said, let's do something fun together. And so then we mapped out what something fun together would be. And the second was Performer, who came and said, we really like your work and we want you to make something for the upcoming Biennale at that point in time. And so that's what we made. That's what we made This One Went to Market for. And because Performer, again, is a Global North is a Global North Arts Biennale. That's why This One Went to Market was particularly pointy and pointed, because it was also going to ask people about what type of Africa do you purchase when you're purchasing an African artist. What idea of Africa do you have? And do you imagine the artist as having agency in having put this thing together and having agency to scam you? So that was a huge part of the thing that informed This One Went to Market. It was where it was going and what we wanted to say about Africans entering into and occupying such spaces. The thing with a commissioning is that it's opaque, because it is somebody making a choice and somebody agreeing to having been chosen. It's very much like somebody coming and saying, will you be my girlfriend? And the other person says yes. Now, the reasoning for that does not look clear to people who are outside that relationship, right? And then when the people come and ask, so that's why whenever people who are asked, why are you single? You can't answer a question like that, because it's so multifaceted. And even the people who are in a relationship and they ask, why in a relationship? It's like, because like there's somebody that I'm in a relationship with, you know. It's very difficult to ask, like for us, like, why would performer choose you? Or why would, you know, it's a difficult question to answer. You can answer it and then people will be like, hey, you're not being humble enough. And then you can also answer it and it's too airy and people are like, you're not giving enough details. So like there's no right answer for it. I do think that it becomes easier to be in commissioning relationships if you've done some work before. So if you have a kind of proof of concept where somebody can understand exactly what your work is, they can understand the narrative threads that tie your works together, if you've kind of defined what your artistic practice is, and then that particular narrative thread deeply aligns with a thing that they're interested in exploring or a thing that they're interested in saying. So people will only ever commission where they see alignment. Again, the artist who is commissioned can refuse a commission for multiple reasons. And I'll give you one. This past year, we've seen a lot more visibility for Black artists globally because of the Black Lives Matter movement. Some of the people who've been giving space to Black artists were never giving space to Black artists before, right? And this is Black artists both on the continent and in the diaspora. There are some people who, of course, wanted to escape bad press and bad optics, and that's why they were giving Black artists room. And then there are people who are coming from a more genuine and exploratory place. Now, there are those who would think that the end point is the same. We have more Black artists out there. And then there are others who would say, question the platform, question the reason that you want to be on that platform. And different artists will take it different ways because we all have different value systems. And that all of those people would embark on seemingly, you know, commission things. So someone calls you and says, we'd really like you to do X and Y and Z with us. So there's something very beautiful about being validated and acknowledged that way. But then you also have to ask yourself, who is validating you? Who is acknowledging you? Why are they doing this? You know, some people are like, let's pick the thing and run with it. Then there are others who would be like, I mean, this sounds great. I don't think I'm in the place where I can do this right now. Maybe we can consider this a little bit later, you know. So also the artist has to be agreed to be commissioned. And that's a thing that we don't really talk about a lot. It's not like always you're chosen and you have to go, because again, the artist is a person with agency and you have to decide that you're gonna make the thing after, you know. So there's definitely all of that to consider as well, like who is doing the commissioning, and then what does that mean? So I don't think it's so much tapping into commissioning that artists need to think through. It's much more, how do I work with people who are not the immediate people that I work with? Because you'll be able to work with them in multiple ways. So when I do collaborations, how does that go? Because a commissioning is kind of like a collaboration. It's just that the person says, I want to be able to say that we did a thing together. But me, what I want to do, because I like you and I want you to do something that looks like this, and then I'll come and maybe give you some money. And then now you guys figure out what the artistic output would be, right? So now they're trusting you to keep the spirit of the intended partnership in the work that you do, because it's also very possible someone can give you money and then you make a thing that doesn't align with what they intended at all. And they're like I know I commissioned this, but so actually the deeper question that I think artists and cultural practitioners and media practitioners should think through as regards a commissioning is, what is my foundational thought process around how collaborations work? Am I able to kind of hold on to and share with somebody what their intentions are? Can I trust them with my intentions? And have I ever produced a work that has made not just me, but somebody else that I'm working with happy? Because that's what would tell you that if you're commissioned to do a work, then it'll be great. Because also being commissioned to do a work is not the same as like being a service provider. They have very strong overlaps, but they're not the same. In the sense of a service provider, somebody comes and they tell you exactly what they want. I want this, it has to look like this. So like if someone comes and hires you to be, for instance, the director of a film, they're trusting your vision, but they're hoping that you know the types of films that they like. You know, if you're brought on to be the director of Transformers 5, for instance, or The Fast and the Furious, you're not going to make a slow, kind of reflective, like, it's action scenes nonstop, it's car crashes, people are flying through the air, stunts, like that's what you've been hired to make. So you're gonna make that. Yeah. If you've been hired to do wardrobe for The Crown, you already know what your references are going to be, who are the people that you're going to have to talk to, the kind of budget that you've been told that you're going to be able to deal with. It's not for you to reinterpret Diana. That's not your work, right? But then a commission gives the artist a little bit more leeway. The person comes and says, I trust you, I like where you're going, I'm interested for this to be an adventure, for it to bring out something new. So then they're trusting that they're going to like the something new, which is much more kind of risk-taking than your traditional kind of service provision. I think there's room for both. I think different artists have different ideas about the types of things they want to do. There's some artists who do not work with clients, absolutely not. There's some who work with clients, but some clients sometimes, for some reasons, sometimes those reasons change from year to year. So maybe in 2017, from June to August, you are open to taking clients. And then after that, you are like, I've taken one client and they have reminded me why I don't like clients. The artists who almost exclusively work with clients, I don't think the idea of these artists being better than those artists because they get more commissions than others, I don't think that's valid. I think there's a certain type of visibility and validation that does come with being commissioned for particular works, especially because of who commissioned you and why. But then it's not necessarily that these artists who are commissioned are better or CG what. Sometimes it's multiple other things to think through. So yeah, I guess maybe the too long don't read version of what I've said is commissions mean things. They mean different things to different people. They're not a sign that you are more valid as an artist because you've not necessarily gotten them. But they can tell you very interesting things about what it is like to work with somebody, and that sometimes they're not necessarily successful. I think in the grand scheme of things, multiple things have been commissioned in places and we've not seen all of them, you know?
Okay, and you mentioned collaboration, which is another thing which we are interested in this house. Literally in this house because we go to each other's houses these days. But we earlier in this film festival. I'm sorry, there's noise in the background.
No, listen. Noise is what it is.
Yeah, so earlier in this film season, we spoke to one of the members of the Surreal 16 collective, and we're talking about
that name is amazing. First of all,
right?
That name is incredible.
And so we spoke to Michael Omonwa, and we were talking about what the collaborative process looks like. How do you go about making work in a collective? Away from the traditional genius maker who makes things by himself, and it's usually himself, and
right.
Versus this collaborative process. So maybe talk to us a little bit about what the NOWNESS collaborative art process looks like. What goes into the making of the work. And I hear birds, yay!
Birds are amazing. I mean, the first thing around making work together is that the reason that we're so intentional about it is that it has made our work richer, like hands down. Because there's so many different experiences, there's so many different points of view just within our collective itself, because we all come from different places, we all have different identities, we all experience different things in the ways in which we live and move. Excuse me. And so the minute you have a place where all those points of view can inform the way our work can go, really magic happens. And one of our favorite things, it's also one of our most intense processes, is when we are, for instance, writing a story together or making a decision about what story we want to tell. Because again, multiple things inform that story. It's like somebody comes and says, like I was, I was reading X and Y and Z and I saw this, and then I thought, but, then they come and then they put that on the table where people are sitting, and they're like, okay, well, like, that's interesting. Let's follow it to the end. And then in the middle of following it to the end, another idea jumps in, and then we panel beat, and then one of our favorite statements is somebody coming to say, I've come with a spanner. And then we're like, oh God. So now somebody comes and like the spanner is literally the spanner in the works, and somebody comes and says, so when you follow this to the end, we are then saying X and Y and Z, this is what it looks like. And we're like, wow, that's not our intention at all. I think we're going to have to backtrack and start again, or we have to move back to this point and then start and da, 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 da. Sometimes also you have the good problem where there are multiple beautiful ways a thing can go. Then now you have to choose one. Choosing one is extremely vicious, because what we do is one person, one vote. And then it becomes like campaigns. So people are like, okay, so me, the reason I want this is because, and if we do this, then we're also able to do this. It also says this. We also, and then somebody else comes and says something. So sometimes we have multiple things to vote for. And so we do rounds and rounds of voting until now the last one is usually the most vicious one, where like people are sad because their option was cut like 2 cycles of voting ago. It's like being in Survivor or Lost, where like people are now voting on who is going to leave the island. It can be terrible. But then like when you see like a work from us, there's like, even us, we have, this thing could have actually gone this way. It's just that at that point in time, people voted for this because of this reason. And sometimes people have to come and defend their choice. Sometimes we will be in a place where we say we have to go with that choice because we voted, because if we go back into voting, then the thing will not get made. And so actually one of the things that that our voting methodology does is create the boundary of time, because we are very good at thinking, mapping, and we can map forever, right? But then if you're mapping forever, then the thing won't get made. So like for us, what our baseline is that everybody who is a member of the NOWNESS collective, and that we all come with different ways of engaging with the artistic process, and we consider the people who help with our admin, with our comms, with our accounts as full members of the collective, not just the artists. There's this idea that every member of an arts collective is an artist. For us, we interpret that as everybody who puts their labor into getting an artistic work is a member of the collective. For us, different people would view it differently. And I guess different people would make differently. But then for us, you find that when it comes to the execution of the thing is where now you find that now technical skill will decide who is going to do X and Y and Z. So you'll find that in a screenplay layout, it won't be everybody. It'll be the people who are more familiar with laying out screenplay. When somebody's thinking through wardrobe, the wardrobe people are the ones who are going to do that. When somebody's thinking through, so how are we going to produce this thing? It's the production team who are going to do that. When it's storyboard, it's the camera people and the director who are going to, and the directors who are going to figure out that. We've been really excited about exploring co-direction, and we've just started doing that with our last 2 projects. So we've just shot a film was directed by 2 of us. We've never done that before, so that was super interesting. That was Mars and Akati. And then we are with the current work that we're exploring, which is our first documentary work, the one that you'd introduced, called The Feminine in the Foreign. I'll be directing that with Mars, and we're looking to co-direction much more than we used to before, because it also allows for this idea of multiple points of view to affect an aesthetic outcome. With a work like film, of course, already multiple points of view are affecting the outcome, right? If we go back to the example of The Crown, the Crown would not be The Crown if the wardrobe department were not the wardrobe department that they are. Where they go, they're sourcing directly from historical, archival photographs. Sometimes they'll go directly to the designer. Sometimes the designer will actually recreate the thing, or sometimes they're able to get the exact thing that was worn. And so then people really get a sense of, this is what the person, and I'm not like worshiping The Crown. It's just a marvel of production, right? With where people, what happens when people are given what they need in order to make the thing that they want to make. And so like if you look at film like that, because that film is informed by all those aesthetic points of view, it's informed by wardrobe, it's informed by the art department and the props and the people who do the locations, it's informed by the camera person and the person who has decided where the eye of the people is going to be at any given point in time, and it's informed by the director who's telling the actors, this is the emotion that I want you to have, and then it's informed again by the aesthetic decisions of the editor and the person who comes with the soundtrack. Because if you look at a clip that's cut with one soundtrack and a clip that's cut with another soundtrack, it gives you a completely different vibes, completely different energies and emotions. So with a thing like that, it's already very collectively made, but then the intention towards collective viewpoints can be a lot stronger. And so like for us, we consistently unpack that. We also do it with our non-film works. So we do that, the DJ squad are doing that all of the time. Like a full half of the collective are now DJs. And some people had been DJs for a longer time before, and others kind of learned and got on board. And that's a thing that also makes us super, super excited. And they all DJ differently. And so even within the collective, they are like a sub collective, you know, they're like a mini collective within the collective, and they're figuring out what the plan for the DJ squad is, what the plan for the mixes that we put out on our Mixcloud and the events that we do is completely. So thinking through things together gives us results that the person thinking through them alone would never have. We also say that we would not be the Nest if, you know, the things we've been able to do together are not the things that we would have done if we were by ourselves, if we're exploring the arts ourselves. And then there's another thing that people like to say about collectives, which is that collectives they're not long-lived. I think that's a ridiculous thing to say, because collectives serve the purpose that they're made for. And so I love when people reach a point in time when they say this thing is actually not serving me anymore, and then people leave. You know, even us, we've had people leave the Nest Collective, and we've had new people join, and those things have helped. There's collectives that were formed for a particular reason towards a particular end. They met that end, or they didn't necessarily meet that end, but they discovered why they didn't meet that end. There are collectives for projects, there are collectives for individual particular things that then will disband when the thing is done. That's not commentary on how collectives last. It's much more about what was the purpose for doing the exploration. And so like for us, if we look up and we're like, wow, actually we're still here, we're still making things, like, you know, we ask ourselves that a lot. And when and at the point in time when it doesn't serve us anymore, then it won't serve us anymore. But so far it has and continues to, and it's a thing we're deeply grateful for.
You do such a good job of answering some of these questions. I'm just like, should I still ask this question considering Njoki has covered so much ground? But but a thing which I'd like for you to explicitly talk about would be the process and insights that are gained in anthology making. I'm thinking about this in the context of We Need Prayers, but also in terms of the other projects that the collective has been involved in. Because as you're saying, you're doing all sorts of things. You're not just a filmmaking collective or a DJ collective, or you're doing a lot of things. You know, even for instance, the work you're doing with IIP, which is really interesting for me personally as a person who has a strong archival impulse, but also in terms of the conversations we've had, say, with Chow Maina, or later with the group behind If Objects Could Speak, and so on. So I'm interested in what the process of, you know, the making of these works, but also the particular insights you get from each of these different art making, you know, thought-provoking, thought-making projects you're engaged in.
First of all, Chow is amazing. I need to say that she's an incredible mind. And she's an incredible like artist and practitioner. We're always so like provoked and inspired by her work, and by the ways in which she chooses to take on history, you know. And like for her, it's like she's an artist and history is the form, you know. It's very, very beautiful. I mean the idea of the idea of anthology definitely allows, like when I was saying about we need prayers before, where we were like, there's an infinity of viewpoints here, and the only way we're going to be able to capture them all is by looking at them from different angles, as different characters in different times, right? It's also just occurred to me that if you look at we need prayers, there's a significant number of the things that take place during the day, and then there's others that take place during the night, which can also kind of lead you to commentary about how Nairobi is a very different place at those different times, right? And the types of conversations that you find, the types of interactions that you find, the types of nonsenses that you find have all sorts of different flavors. I think when the task set before one is a wide one, and the points of entry are many, anthology can be a very useful, like having an anthological approach can be a very useful way of kind of understanding and unpacking that. I'll give you another example with our work, Stories of Our Lives, which again is banned in Kenya, and so it can't legally be watched in Kenya, even though it's currently on South Africa Showmax. So people who watch South Africa Showmax will be able to access Stories of Our Lives. With Stories of Our Lives, when we were just kind of unpacking the idea of Kenyan queer narratives in the beautiful, beautiful qualitative way in which they were told to us, because we went to people and people would tell us stories, just stories, There are some people who would have been able to make the decision to make one grand film about one character or a few characters that then encompasses multiple things. And for us, we were like, it's so difficult because we can't make the choice as to which story can carry the weight of that possible engagement for us with the ways in which we were seeing it. And so that's why we decided to make several short ones. Again, multiple characters, multiple points of view, different times, different intentions, different energies, and then to just kind of string them together. And we find that, like, coming into the thing with much more of a multiples way of seeing has been useful for those particular works, and that we can look back and we defend the choice. I suppose if we had made a thing that was like one overarching encompassing thing, and there are people who have been able to make a choice like that when they're presented with any large number of stories, there are people who've been able to do that, and for them that choice worked. I think for us, we particularly move towards anthology because it allows us to see many things many times, and I suspect that could be informed by the fact that we are a collective, and so we already see one thing in multiple ways from multiple perspectives. And so anthology can be one of the most honest reflections of that it's like, we don't want one point of view to carry us through the whole thing. It can then be seen in many different ways. One place that was definitely one point of view that carried us through the entire thing was Tukomacho, because Tukomacho was the exploration of one man's story and the ways in which different people entered into the story. And so there, the nuances were much more, they were not as cut and dry, because like everybody is here in Biko's story, because Biko is the main character, and so then Biko relates with so and so as the main character, and so we have to follow Biko more than we follow all the other people. But then anthology would then say, for instance, one episode is Biko, another episode is and that you find that we revert to type even within that space, because with some episodes we choose Salat to follow, who's the main person that Biko is working with or against, or the person who's against Biko's plan for his own life. So sometimes we'll follow Salat, but then for the vast majority of the thing, when you choose a main character, then you have to go with them everywhere they go. And there are other people who would be interesting, but you can't follow them because they're not the main. And so anthology work then allows you to pick a different main, go with a different main, travel with them for a shorter period of time, and then come back. And that it's actually very much a polarity. It's like, do we choose many people and go with all of them, or do we choose one? And they're just narrative choices. They have different weights. They mean different things. They can work better in some places. There's some that you will actually choose only because you like them, you know. And so that also should definitely be a thing that can be that should be followed. Sometimes you just like it better, and that is reason enough. It doesn't have to be deep, you know. I think that also kind of informs the fact that we're multidisciplinary, because we work in multiple different forms. Sometimes film is not the only form in which one can explore a particular thought. Sometimes the thought alone is enough, and we've also been discovering that, especially with projects like IIP, which have pushed us to learn different ways of engaging with different types of institutions for different reasons, and there's been a lot of learning and engagement there in ways that we would not have done if we were just kind of fixed on the idea of only engaging as filmmakers or only engaging as DJs. I think there's a lot of room for people to be able to push themselves to see, can we try this out? And I know that one of the things that gives us courage to push ourselves and try is because we are many. And so we have people who are good at different things for different reasons. I am not a DJ. I will never be one. But then I know so much more about music because I work with DJs. I know so much more about how music sits, how its energies inform an event, why people mix in different ways, what are the intentions of a live performance, because I work with musicians and with songwriters. I'm not a fashion practitioner, but because of working with fashion practitioners who are so prolific, there are things that I know about fashion now that I would never have known because without working with people that I work with. And so there's so many ways that collective work can teach us beyond our own personal scope, and can open up new lines of inquiry, new lines of curiosity. Being many allows us to hold safe space for each other to be curious. We would not have the DJs that we have today if a couple of people were not curious about what it means to be a DJ and choose to learn and be encouraged by everybody, as opposed to taking on the journey by yourself and then being worried vis-a-vis somebody always encouraging you and telling you you're doing amazing, or you mix better when you stick with this particular type of thing, or like your eye or your instinct there is really good. So we have a lot of kind of internal critique, internal validation, internal encouragement that also catalyzes this idea of being interested in multiple forms, this idea of being able to express yourself in more than one way. That can work for some people. Again, it's not, these things are never a formula. They can work for some people, they don't necessarily work for everybody. So yeah.
So one of the things I'm always interested in is not just art or, but also its afterlife. So it's been over 2 years since this particular anthology was released, and I know that it's available on YouTube. So, a popular place for people to go and watch things, versus the nature of, say, a platform like Vimeo, which is like a filmmaker's spot, if you know what I'm saying. So I'm curious about what feedback and what conversations have been spurred by the anthology in the time after, what do you hear from people? What sort of things have come even to you just in the rewatching or in conversations with people about the anthology way after the fact?
So that's a super interesting question, especially about We Need Prayers in particular. One of the things that we say about our work as a nest is that the work is not complete until the people have said something about it, until audience engagement has happened and has begun, and in a very robust way. The work for us is not done. And until we've been able, people have come to ask us questions like, "Hi, why is this scene so dark?" Because we got that a lot with with Chukomacho, and it was intentional, but then people are just like, and so even those conversations were super interesting. One of the most interesting things with We Need Prayers, because it has such diverse subjects. In one episode, you're talking about what happens when people are robbed. In another episode, it's like an event within a government office and people in a line, and the line is not a productive one. In another episode, we are on a date with somebody. So like we got comments from people who came and then they watched their episode. You know, there's some people who came and watched everything, and so then they had thoughts about the wider something. And then there are people who are like, hey, this one is about a date, let's go watch that one. Or, hey, this one is about a night out, let's go watch that one. And then now people would come and engage on that in particular. The energies of engagement were completely different. For instance, with the one with the date, there was a lot of gendered conversation in the comments, right? And that was one of the reasons that we really liked for quite a period of time. We really enjoyed putting our work up on Facebook, because then people in the comments can really go wild in ways that other platforms find it difficult, right? So people in the comments will be able to so people will come and write paragraphs. So the one for dating, people would come and say, you know, men, and then people would come with, you know, women, something. So like for us there, we would then be kind of like the dialogue moderator. So if somebody has really gone overboard with being rude, being super whatever, we might be able to say, hey, so like for us, we don't really view things that way because X and Y and Z. And so you'll go and find with our works that are present on Facebook, especially, where we put up the entire visual there for people to watch. People have come, they ask questions, and then you'll find we came and replied. We came and whatever. And even the replies are things that we would discuss collectively. So sometimes some people would be in charge of the thing and like they're like, no, this is what we would say. Other times it's like, well, this person has asked a difficult thing. And so how do we necessarily respond to that in that way? So then now we will discuss it together. Some with this one went to market, we got a lot of the art crowd. It was artists. Sometimes artists were sliding to the DM saying, listen, this is it, you know. And then there were a lot of people laughing at themselves in the comments. There were like, it was a very, very different kind of energy engagement. The government one was wild because people were just like, so did you guys just go and like do video in a real government office? Others were tagging government offices and saying, "Sijui, this university, come and see. This is exactly what it's like to be in the office." So
I'm sorry, but
like,
I love Kenyans. Like this energy they have is
Kenyans are amazing, man. I mean,
unmatched.
I think I really wish we want I don't think we're people who foundationally really want to be moving with these energies, because I'll tell you a very interesting thing. So I recently started watching Showmax shows, which are amazing. It has really surprised and delighted me how well they selected some of the shows that are on that platform. And one of the shows that's super interesting is Date My Family. So of course I went and watched Date My Family Kenya. The number of people who begin introducing themselves in a romantic context with mimi ni mtu mwenye napenda amani. Let me tell you, I said, someone needs to write a paper, man. Everybody's here saying they love peace. I'm like, what relationships have people been in where in order to begin the next relationship, you have to begin by saying,
it's rough in this
by saying,
Njoki.
myself, I am a lover of peace. So I feel very strongly, I mean, like now coming back to a much more serious reflection, I feel like Kenyans are foundationally people who, like, we don't like hatupendi kusumbuliwa, we don't like being disturbed, so even the process by which you have to come with energy of telling somebody, nyinyi, by the way, like, we're not those people. It's not us. I feel like there's some cultures that are a little bit more like they're high energy. It's really not us. Us, we really just want to live. We just want to go to places, do our thing, and go home. We lean much more in that general direction. But also the energy of Kenyans when you cross them is unmatched, which is what we got with the episode around the government office, which was called it was called This One Logged Out, because it was about a guy at a computer who said, I mean, we are done for the day, and people are like, so we got very different engagements, because each of the pieces had its own different kind of energy. Definitely when you compare that with the feedback that we got with with Tukomacho, because Tukomacho was episodic, and in order to understand the next episode, it was easier if you watched the episode before. So then you understood this is where the characters are going, what, even though each episode definitely had like a focus point, a thematic area. So like, for instance, with the episode where the criminal was a woman, there was all sorts of conversations about that. In the episode where we were kind of harkening back to the very troubled legacy of whistleblowers in Kenyan history, and the ways in which those whistleblowers were treated. The conversations in the comments were like, we didn't know about this guy, you know, and so like that entire place was about kind of holding space for people to begin to learn. And so each piece will have different engagements with different groups of people for different reasons, and it's one of our favorite places, because we get to listen to people about the work that we've made. We get to hear their critiques. A lot of the critiques that people have made of our work have been incredibly valid, and we just kind of receive them. And we also, because of the things people say, we also start the seeds of new work, and the glimmers of new work starts shining through. So someone will come and make a comment, and they're like, you know, and then a whole thing, and then somebody comes and says, you know, that comment somebody made, it made me think about, and then you follow that, and then your next piece or your next exploration is waiting for you at the end of the thing. So we love that moment when the work meets the audience, when the work finds an audience, because those are completely different things. There's the audience who watch, and then there's the audience who choose to stay, who choose to engage, who choose to love the piece. And also choosing to engage is not necessarily choosing to engage with it because they like it. They can choose to engage with it because they don't. You know, with Tukomacho, one of the places where we were holding space for people to feel all manner of ways was because we made a choice about what our main character would do, which was not necessarily a choice that people enjoyed, which was that our main character was a guy who was going to kill people he didn't agree with, right? And that he was echoing justice systems that chose capital punishment, and that we know that in human rights contexts and human rights based analysis and value systems, people don't agree with capital punishment anymore. But then the public have a very, very different way of seeing some of these things. And again, if you go back even to Stories of Our Lives, there are places where we chose to depict homophobic violence, and we chose to depict it in particular ways. And then there's some places where we said, no, homophobic violence has no place in this particular exploration. We want there to be a multiplicity of things beyond the realities and the very violent realities of homophobia. There's also queer love, there's also queer acceptance, there's multiple things. And that's another thing that anthological ways of seeing can allow you to capture. They can allow you to capture the universe with much more intention than like following one person in one way.
Yeah, I love this idea of, because I'm always interested in this idea of digital publics. Like there are certain publics that are formed by being in digital spaces. And in a place like Twitter, for instance, the way that manifests itself is that people have this false notion of anonymity. And so they can say things they wouldn't necessarily say if you were right in front of them. You know, wakona kifua, which they will not have if you are right in front of them. You know, they're very brazen for that reason. But also this public also means that certain conversations can happen, which I think is, as you're saying, the beauty of a place like Facebook. People even do this thing where they call their friends to come in and say something, you know.
I mean, I think as somebody who makes as somebody who is in this kind of content sphere, and I mean, I use the word content with some trepidation, because there's a lot of ideas around is art content, is content art, what are the overlaps and the places of divergence with a definition like that. But as somebody, I mean, who puts out stuff in digital spheres, it is always, I mean, to be fair, people can be calling their friends to troll you, right? But when people like a thing and then they like it enough to tag their friends, because that's when you start learning. And especially people who work a lot in digital media and marketing will tell you that those are layers of engagement. There is the layer of engagement where you come and like, is great. There's the layer of engagement where you come and share that's a deeper level of engagement. There's a level of engagement where you come and put a comment, right? The one where you put a comment and then you tag other people to come and put comments for you, it really deepens the thing for the person who puts. So they come and they see that actually, like, this is a very deep way of engaging with the thing that I've made, right? And sharing for people to see, it really captures like what we call the social elements of social media, where we want to be able to watch things together, where we want to be able to experience a thing together, such that I want the people that I like to listen to when they think, I want them to all watch this video of a kitten dancing, such that then we can all have the same reference point for this kitten and then share our different thoughts. Then somebody will come and say, you know, I actually used to have a kitten like that. And somebody says, no, you never said that you had a kitten like that. And then the person comes and shares a picture. Then everyone comes and says, oh my God, this kitten. Then 3 other people who saw this exchange by chance come and start engaging under this kitten, where they say, I had a kitten who looked exactly like that. Did this kitten used to do X and Y and Z? Then you actually discover that maybe these kittens were actually from 1 litter, right? Or these 2 people continue to engage about cats. Your engagement in Ingia kwa DM, the next thing you hear, these people they're doing work together, or they are now in a relationship of some kind, or now they're best friends. And then everybody's like, what is this? And that's like this kind of magic of the social elements of engaging on social media. I do want to say that there is and I've seen this a lot, there's a whole it's not that serious conversation around, which is why people then take the opportunity to be as rude as they possibly can, where it's like, it's just Twitter, it's not real life. I mean, like I beg to differ for multiple reasons. One is that I think like it was kind of maybe the strongest way of visualizing that kind of prophecy was the Matrix, where you can kind of plug in your head and then exist in another world. But I feel like digital existence is now a thing. I feel like I exist digitally in the same ways that I exist physically, and then that my digital persona can be a very different person than my physical persona. There are people who know, I feel like the people who know me in real life, and the people who kind of come and they find I've done a thread about X and Y and Z, they have a very different idea of who I am, because they know me because of that thread, vis-a-vis somebody who knows me because they met me, they work with me, they see me every day, we've met at a thing, they've gone on a date with me, whatever. Like, all those ways of knowing are completely different. But digital existence should not be said that, oh, somebody just went and said something on a platform, vis-a-vis like their real life. People are forgetting that like those digital engagements have real life consequences. People have gotten jobs. People have gotten massive opportunities because of things that they've done online, right? And so it definitely has already crossed into real life. I don't think there's any taking it back. People have also lost jobs. They've lost livelihoods. Their entire reputation has gone to shambles because of like a random thing that they did online, right? And so that's why people should take the idea of existing in both spaces very seriously. But with a particular view to how people speak online, I think this is one of those things that you have to take with both its lights and its shadows. That you can put a comment in anybody's tweet and they can actually respond. Like, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. So if you're those people who feel like you want to troll celebrities, you want to talk badly, and then you go and you're always saying, one day, like, you never know, that person can, in the same way that you can reply to them, they can reply to you, like, or even like just a thing can just become magic just immediately because of this whole idea of universal access. Like, somebody came and said they really love lesbian rom-coms, but they would extra love the idea of like Die Hard starring Charlize Theron, where Charlize Theron goes to rescue her wife. Charlize Theron quote tweeted and said, "Where do I sign?" Right? And suddenly this thing was someone's random idea that they tweeted Kiovio. And now people are like, wait, is this a real thing? So now in the comments, you'll find people are just people are just, the quote tweets are wild, it's insane, you know, and that's what digital existence and engagement is. It creates room for things that would not be possible in the physical, because the physical world has different parameters. But then the engagements in both worlds don't have to have different rules. I think it's possible to engage with kindness. I think it's possible to have the same conflicts and fights that you have, but in the same way that you would have them if you were looking at the person. I think this idea that you can dehumanize because you're not seeing somebody is very, very dangerous, and is the same thing that is at the root of all of the othering that we experience in everyday life. I definitely feel that people should clap back if they feel like they want to clap back. People should block if they want to block. This idea that you should be open to people telling you things because this is a marketplace of ideas, I think all of that is nonsense. I think people should, in the same way that you close the door of your house, you can decide who you want to be engaging with in multiple ways, shapes, and forms, you know. But the idea that you can dehumanize because it is the digital realm and it's not real, it's not felt tangibly by the body, is also the same kind of rhetoric you'd get from somebody who says because it was just emotional, like it's not a real affair, or because it's just emotional, it's not real pain, nobody hit you, or you are not sexually assaulted because there was no penis that somebody saw, you know. And I'm like, no, that's not how the thing works. It's a lot deeper. It's a lot deeper.
Wow, let's zoom out a bit and talk about what opportunities or challenges there are in art making. And part of the reason I'm asking this is anybody who's working in the arts is interested in funding and distribution and the way in which work travels in the world. And I'm especially asking this because the Nest, with its work at HIVA and its position in the art space, is uniquely positioned to speak to this. So I'm interested in what possibilities exist within our context, but also within, you know, the global sphere in terms of the opportunities and challenges with regards to art making.
I think, and maybe for that, I can speak from a HIVA perspective. I think we're in a very beautiful and interesting space right now. There's a lot of people who are coming together to start figuring out what the bones of distribution that works better for us would look like. This kind of awakening is also coming at the very lovely time when we are starting to realize that focusing on an African, on a Black audience, can get us the eyes that we want, that we need. And so you find that a lot of people are like, how can music travel better within Africa? How can Africans listen more to African music? How can Black audiences around the world, or people who love the outputs of Black artists, of African artists, how can those people get some of this work better? Because you find, again, when you zoom out, that Africa's contribution to global cultural output, literally, at last, somebody did counts, and I don't know what, I'm not exactly sure what parameters they were using. I think I can go and check, but we saw once it was like 1%. And it's like, what, you know? And that's for multiple reasons, right? But these are the reasons that people are now starting to figure out solving, especially when you view the artist to the finished work as just the beginning of a long story, which then begins with who needs to see the story? Who does the artist need to see the story? Or who does the artist need to see the sculpture or this painting? How can we use the digital space much more than we've been using it before? What are the things that hamper people being seen in these places? Whose eyes do these things need to get to, so that then it can do what we have intended for it to do? And so, like, one of the things that's really rising is like, a lot of times some artists have been in a place where they can do that work for themselves, where you are the person who made the work and you're also the person who distributes the work. And so, like, even for us as the Nest, the books that we've so far published have been self-published, because we just said, we can publish the book ourselves, and then we did it. That comes with pros and cons. Sometimes when somebody else publishes a book, they also, because they work with books all the time and it's all they do, so they know how books need to move in order to sell. They know where books need to go to which books need to be placed where for what reason. Now for us, when we self-publish, it means that you have to figure out all of that stuff yourself, which can be terrible and exhausting, right? It can come also with control, and you have complete control over your thing. But then sometimes you can have a bigger thing when you share it, right? And so, but then also again, the other cons around publishing and whatever is that the person has to choose your work. So some people are like, I just want to publish. I'm not interested in getting into the race around if the person has to choose between 5 stories. Can I weather the heartbreak of being one of the 4 who's not necessarily selected? Because again, sometimes resources can be scarce, right? So there's pros and cons definitely to either way and form of doing things. For us, one of the things that we did was to put our work out online a lot because we wanted it to be available for free. That of course comes with its own cons, because you can't assume that everybody has digital access, especially in the country in which we live. That being said, because Safaricom does the things that it does, sometimes they'll say that, oh, Facebook is free. That of course has its own problematics, because the deals between Safaricom and Facebook to share your data, etc., whatever, I mean, those are all their own conversations, but that ends up as Facebook being free for the people who are watching, which then means that if you're watching videos on Facebook or videos on YouTube, those can be free, which then also creates a lot of possibilities for artists, for content creators, for people who are engaged in arenas where the public needs to engage with their work. So again, I think maybe the thing to say is that the work travels in different ways for different reasons. There are commercial paths for work, and you find that it's a lot easier for commercial work to travel those paths. In the film sector, you find that film that has already kind of defined itself very, like, this is an action film, this is a rom-com, this is a whatever, like films that have made their own decisions in that regards, will find themselves traveling very easily in a commercial space. You'll find the odd crossovers where it's like, this is an independent film, but the commercial people like it for whatever reason. Or this is a commercial film, but the indie crowd like it. So sometimes work will cross for any number of reasons, which are all completely subjective, because again, the ways art is consumed and loved and chosen are all completely subjective as well. So it's actually the exception to the rule when work crosses, but you find that indie work moves in indie circles, and then you find that commercial work moves in commercial circles, and never the twain shall meet except when they do. And so the same goes with music. You find that people know this is the trajectory that particular genres of music will take. This music will be listened to by this crowd in this place. So then people who have figured that out, or they're like, we know how to get this other crowd to listen to this other artist. So now the people who are making all of those decisions are really, really beginning to increase in power within the sphere. What's happening though, which is super interesting, is that you find that artists in places where the art trajectories are very industrial and set out. So like places where, like, in order to be a musician, you are signed by a label, the label does all of those things have been defined. There are people who are within those spaces who are moving away from them and are coming back to a much more independent, self-directed space. And then there are people who have always been independent and self-directed who are moving towards some of these much more industrial structures, because those structures serve them a little bit better. So I think the thing that is actually most important for the artist is what would serve me, what would serve the things that I want for my career. And then you might find that those are not the same things that would serve your peer or somebody who's interested in the same work you do, but from a completely different place. There's some people who, for instance, want to be a DJ for parties only. That's all they want to do. They never want to go and CG cut and raise for a music performance. They just want to go to parties, they DJ there and they go home. There's some people who only want to DJ. They never want to DJ being seen by the public. They want to build their whatever as the person who, they're this curator of playlists. They're this maker of mixes who the public have never seen. And so the thing that they're trafficking in is that thing of anonymity and never having been seen, right? So then their trajectory is going to be a completely different one from somebody who says, I want to be the biggest DJ filling stadia. That's what I want. And, and what does that look like in a post-COVID world, right? So people really, really have to answer questions for themselves as regards where do I want my work to be seen. And there are more and more people, I think, raising up now who their work is to get work seen. So the artist doesn't necessarily have to take on also the burden of making sure that their work gets seen. If you're the person who just wants to make your thing and then somebody else takes it over, then, you know, there's a lot more room for things like that, even though, of course, that also comes with its own pros and cons, right? So I think life is like, and practice and work in whatever sector is choosing the pros and cons that you can live with, that will get you closest to the thing that looks like the thing that you want. Because all of these things, you're making multiple, you know, compromises to see what is working. But definitely from the kind of sector building perspective of HIVA, which of course again leans commercial, which can be problematized by some. It's understandable. There's more people who are putting themselves in a position where they manage artists, they figure out where artists' work goes. Their work is the work of distribution. Their work is the work of marketing. And you find that more and more artists are kind of giving room for that. So you find people like Anyiko PR, who has become a PR agency that is known for working with creatives, for working with cultural practitioners, for working in film and music, and has built a number of networks that make her very, very good at doing that. So we're finding more and more people like that kind of rising up. And Anyiko is not doing like regular PR for like the launch of Omo. You know what I mean? Like her work now is completely niche and completely different. So those niches are going to be a huge part of building the industry. And at the same time, you find that artists are also breaking away from needing to be built in that direct way. And you find that the artists that can afford to do that usually are the ones who their audiences have already been built. And so they can have a lot more control over who they're saying what to and why.
Wow. Lastly, we could talk for a really long time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, but maybe one last question would be what we can look forward to from the next. You know, I mean, your collective does a lot of, you know, varied work. So, you know, just a snapshot of what to expect. And I mean,
Oh, wow.
I think there's also some comfort in asking about what to expect in a time when maybe the word of the year is probably going to be unprecedented. Like we've used this word so many times in 2020. But yeah, maybe give us just a few lines about what to expect from the next going forward.
I mean, I think first of all, humanity, especially everyone who was alive at this time, reserves the right to use the word unprecedented in whatever way, shape, or form they want, because we all lived the plot twist. All of us, we were sitting in our homes, and then the plot twist happened, right? And then, like the plot twist has left very many of us behind, right? There's some people who are not alive here; they're not alive now. There's some people who their bodies and their health is forever changed because of this plot twist. I've been talking a lot because of my background in healthcare about how the healthcare sector globally is under such deep crisis because of this plot twist. And so I don't think we're going to understand how deeply health will change because of the ways in which it's being managed now, both by public and private sectors, right? And also by the ways in which the wider society is engaging with it. I strongly suspect people are going to really resist their children saying, I want to become a doctor. I'm like, is this the world that you want to send your child out into to go and become a doctor? You know, especially in this country, in this particular country.
Yeah, you know that thing that you say about choosing your fighter. It's like medicine is not the fighter you want to choose after all the mess we've seen. Yeah, for sure.
Very, very difficult.
Yeah,
it's going to be very, very difficult to convince people to be doctors here, to stay doctors here. It's not going to be easy. But back to a more major key. I think we definitely have a bunch of things coming. The first is definitely we were shooting a feature, so that's gone into edits, and so we're going to see that in the first half of the next year. We also have some interesting thoughts around how that will be disseminated. So we're thinking through a whole bunch of things in that regard. there's another film that we've been working on called The Feminine, the Foreign, which is like a documentary exploration of activistic work. So far, the cities that we've shot in are London and Cape Town, and we were supposed to go and do the shooting ourselves, but then plot twist. So we've shot remotely, which has really been a whole, you know, experience and engagement. And so that's going to be going into edits in next year as well. And so we're really, really excited about what that'll look like. And then for IIP, because you talked about IIP earlier, we are going to be doing where we've been part of the people who've been putting together works for an exhibition which will start in March this year. Actually, I think towards the end of February. I'm always confusing the dates, but it'll be in the next year, the very first quarter. So we've been working on the engagements for that, and that's been super interesting as well. So those are the things that I can talk about. The other ones are like brewing, and we are terrible at talking about things when they're in the middle of brewing. But at least these ones, like, it's already pretty much public knowledge that we did a shoot, and we were so grateful at least that there was no like COVIDing on that shoot. We were so grateful for that. We've been doing this remote shoot as well, so that's been really interesting. And then there's the exhibition coming up, so that has been fun.
Oh, this is an exciting note for us to end on, you know, something hopeful, something to look forward to. And also, you know, like now the next time one of those people who ask, so people don't want to say anything about 2021, will be like, we are looking forward to these 3 projects. So this is exciting.
We're really, really glad that we have those projects, you know, because we're super grateful for that as well.
We want every reason for optimism, to be honest. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much, Njoki, for making time to have this conversation with me today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you online and offline. So I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to also getting into your podcast. Like I love the way you think. I love the ways in which like the thing that you said about having an archival mind, because I really followed all of the tweets you were doing about Kikuyu Radio. I was obsessed with them deeply so. And so things like that, and like your particular approach have always been super exciting for me. So this has also been wonderful.
Thank you. This is such a nice way to end this. So, enjoy the rest of your day, and and all the best with all the projects you have lined up.
Asante from me and from the rest of the collective. And happy December and happy holidays.
You too. Thanks.